Hey everyone, it's James White here. Welcome to another edition of Sales Conversations with Sales Experts. So I'm really pleased and proud that I've got a guy that's joining me on the call today who is an absolute sales expert in what he does. I saw a first video that he shared with one of my other recent participants, Jason Bay, and I was blown away by some of the insights that he was sharing, and what knowledge this man has of sales is incredible. So I reached out to him. I said, "Look, Richard, I'd love to get you on to the conversations that we're having and share your expertise and knowledge around sales and what works and what doesn't work with so many different businesses." And I'm absolutely excited that he's here today. So we're going to get into the conversation in a minute with Richard Smith from Refract, who's the head of sales for Refract. If you don't know about Refract, have a little look at them. They're great. They help you identify and analyze the sales conversations that you have as a business and help you get results from that. So I'm absolutely thrilled that Richard's here, and I know it's going to be a great session for you everyone to have. So let's get into the session. Let's have a listen to Richard sharing some of his insights and wisdom on how you can get better sales results through the words you issue and talk. So let's get into the session, have a listen to how you can listen to Richard sharing his insights on what you can do to get better sales results. Fantastic. So as I mentioned, we've got Richard Smith from Refract on the line to share some insights and thoughts on everything in the world of sales and how to make sales people successful. So Richard, good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, James. It's a pleasure to be on here. Looking forward to a nice discussion and sharing some of my experiences and mistakes that I've made along the way. So
I've got to say, I was captivated. I was listening to it. So we had I did an interview with Jason Bay a week or so ago, and I was captivated by a conversation that you had with Jason around the 35 seconds interruption in a minute. So I'm going to come on and talk about that part in a sec. But for those that don't know you or don't know a bit about Refract, then I'm going to share some information about Refract and the great product it is. Talk a little bit about who you are and your background in sales, and a little bit about Refract as well for my viewers to get familiar with.
yeah. So I'm the head of sales, one of the co-founders here at Refract.ai. So I've been in the field of sales for about 14 years now. It's not a huge amount of time compared to lots of people, but definitely have learned a lot of things along the way in that space of time. Really, I feel like I've done all roles within the sales function, from SDR, just booking meetings for business development managers, through to doing small deals over the phone, enterprise deals, and now running and building a sales team here at Refract. Really, what we do as a business, one of the ironic things that we always are very mindful of, is we sell a product which is all about helping to improve sales conversations to sales leadership. So really, there is no kind of hiding place for us. There's a high bar and expectation from the prospects that we sell to. So we've got to be pretty good at what we do. But ultimately, the whole purpose of Refract is about helping companies get a better understanding as to what's going on in the conversations that their sellers are having with customers. It's often a bit of a black box. Sales leadership are often making big decisions based on what's in a CRM. Unfortunately, what's in a CRM is heavily influenced by the interpretation of a salesperson. But what they aren't really focused on is, what does that conversation actually sound like? So our technology is all about analyzing those conversations and extracting valuable business insight to help, ultimately improve outcomes for sales teams and help them become more successful.
And obviously, I'm someone that's a sales trainer and mentor. I'm aware of what you guys do, and I've sort of not seen it. I've seen this sort of stuff, and it's so incredibly clever that, just to give people an insight, you guys can analyze a conversation, and you can analyze whether the types of questions or the types of responses that a salesperson has given has enabled that person to get the end result they want, right? From the types of stuff you do. It's very, very clever. You're understanding. It's very, very clever stuff.
Yeah. No, it's. I think we do feel like what we're doing is very sort of bleeding edge. And I think as sales has, the appreciation of sales, that's moved away from it being seen as this art form of, like, the salesperson who can, get, tell the best jokes and be the cheeky chappy and all these kind of like this, like sort of the most flamboyant salespeople are the ones who get the best results. I think we've moved on from there to definitely seeing sales as more of a science, being much more data driven, and even from the perspective of that, even salespeople who are introverted can become very successful salespeople because they understand process, they understand what questions work best, they understand active listening, they understand like specific points in a conversation of when to push back on prospects, all these things, which is about understanding and analyzing what has worked well in the past and then ultimately just replicating those. And that's ultimately what, the crux of what we're doing here.
It's so true, actually. I know we're going to come on to about your experiences of sales and this, but if you, I always think to people now, if you talk to your marketing team and you said to your marketing team, go and spend £100,000, and by the way, don't worry about what you spending it on. Don't worry about what works. Don't worry about the messages. And actually, if that button works, people would think you're mad. They think they literally say, well, what do you mean you're going to spend £100,000 and not measure what you've done? And yet, all right, people, when it comes down to sales, everyone just assumes, okay, well, what's the number that the number hit? Well, can't we go a bit deeper? Can't we dig in a bit more? And you're right. People say, when I do presentations around, people say, oh, I'm not a salesman, I haven't got the gift of the gab. And I'm like, the best two skills that salespeople have for me are they're able to listen and ask great questions. And by the way, that's what you guys do and help people do really well, isn't it? So look, before we get into that, talk to me about your background in sales. Because obviously you've got this, and we'll talk about Refract and how you sort of won what you do now. But what can you remember your first sale, Richard?
Yeah, well, my first sale is in doing a deal and getting money for it in return. Do remember it. So I mentioned at the start, I started in sales as like an SDR booking meetings. And what I observed by being part of that small team is we had, business development managers, essentially people in a revenue generating role. And I'd often kind of see them, whether they were doing meetings in person, whether they were doing meetings online. I'd see them kind of go into these meeting rooms, and sometimes if I was lucky, I would get the chance to sit and shadow them. And what I learned by doing that is thinking, it doesn't seem that complicated what these people are doing, and they're getting paid more than I am. And they're in a revenue generating role. And I actually saw that I could do things differently to what they were doing as well. And so what I started doing kind of on the sly, admittedly, is I started like the odd opportunity that I was creating that I would normally have to put on as a meeting for a BDM. I just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna take one of these for myself and not tell anybody. So and I remember at the time I was selling, or what we were doing as a business is we were selling kind of off the shelf compliance online assessments to companies to help, that they would give to their employees to make sure they've got a good understanding of regulation. And there was a large ferry company that I'd managed to set up an appointment for, and I actually decided to take that one for myself. So I went into the meeting room, didn't really tell anybody I was doing it. Did my demo, which back then I actually cringe when I think back to what I used to do back then. But anyway, at the end of it, the person I was speaking to, who was like their head of legal, quite senior, said, "Okay, yeah, let's move forward." And I was kind of like, "Oh dear me, what do I?" Wasn't expecting that. I think at the time, we're not talking about a huge deal here. It was something like £6,000 or something along those lines. But I think for somebody who'd never done that before.
Obviously, first deal was good, right? Wherever.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like you've got to start somewhere, and the weird thing was my anxiety about announcing to the business that I'd done this deal, and pissing off the business development managers who would have said, "Oh, that should have been for me, that one." And I think actually the opposite happened. I was obviously commended on doing it. I think it showed my initiative. I'd stepped outside the boundaries of my role, but ultimately the CEO was not complaining because there was another client on board. And I think also that proved that actually Rich has got something about him here. He can do more than just setting up appointments. And that's how I started doing more of my own end-to-end sales cycles.
And I always talk to people about, these conversations with, sales experts around that first sale and that first feeling. It doesn't change as you get. Is that incredible? Like, oh my God, I've done it, and sort of like fist pump, get in there. You just feel like you're just 10 feet tall feeling, right? It's the best thing about sales, right?
Oh yeah, it never ever, whether you do a deal for £3,000 or £30,000, just seeing that signed agreement, land in your inbox is just a sense of accomplishment. It's a feeling that you've contributed, and that I still get that buzz now, 13 years on to what I did, back then.
Exactly, and the reality, like you say, of winning business is tough, and you've been through some of those different roles. What do you think some of the obviously a lot of the time, you will work with a lot of salespeople with Refract, but you've seen across a mixture of businesses. What do you think some of the main things that businesses get wrong when it comes to selling riches?
I think probably the main one for me is that, and I'd say this is even for successful businesses, and I do think ultimately this must work for them for them to be successful. But I do wonder how much more successful they could be if they did this. Is they still either train or don't train their salespeople to basically still relying on their product to do all the selling. They are highly product centric as in their pitch, how they present themselves to prospects and customers, and all the things around asking questions and understanding motivations to buy. It's that just isn't there, and there's still a lot of. If I speak with a lot of prospects, do enough demos, and show my product to enough people, someone's gonna bite, and that probably does work for them. But this is a lesson that I learned a long time ago, is that your products don't do the selling. It's the you've got to understand business challenges, personal motivations, and your product just becomes the kind of the validator later on in the sales cycle. And this is why I'm just a huge believer in the discovery part of the sales process, where I think a lot of teams get that wrong, why a lot of teams don't even do discovery in reality. And so I think for me, that would probably stand out, that too often salespeople are still just talk about the product, and hopefully the customer will buy at the end.
Such a good point, and I've been on a number of training programs, business training programs. One of which was a brilliant program, helped me change. But the first thing they talked about was pitching. First thing is just pitch, just practice your pitch. And I'd be like, prospects don't care about your pitch. They don't really care how good you think you are. They just care what impact you're going to make in their world. How are you going to make their world a better place? How are you going to change something? And how do you know how to change their world if you don't ask them? How do you know what's going on in their world? And you go through that discovery process. And it's a bit of the, I talked just a bit around, the 5 key words of sales. It's the understanding bit. And yet so many sales and business people just don't spend any time on it, do they?
No. And I think the word you would pitch, their pitch is like synonymous with sales. And I used to when I was younger in my career, I was speaking with a guy who ran his own marketing agency, and he said, "Oh, we've got some big pitches lined up for next week." I said, "What do you mean a big pitch?" Where we go, like, prospective clients invite us in, and we stand in front of them and we do our pitch. And they said, when we get in front of customers, when we get the chance to pitch, that's when we really come to light. And I always thought back, like, the customers really want you to stand in front of them and do your big fancy pitch. And this is all about us and why we're wonderful and the clients that we've worked with. And here's our 30 PowerPoint presentation slides. And it's like, the reality is I've been on the receiving end of a lot of pitches. And the reality is that you're tuned out of them within the space of 10 minutes because they are completely centric on the salesperson and not the prospect. So I think this thing around pitch is unfortunately, I think, been a massive contributor to the big problem that I'm talking about, because pitch you relate pitch to talking and telling, and that's ultimately the thing that salespeople should be doing less.
It's such a great point, and it's so important. And again, on some of the videos I have about emotional intelligence, emotional sales intelligence, I call it, where you've got to have this ability to be self-aware of what's going on around you, what's happening is. And I've got a couple of clients of mine that I work with, and I tell people, if I introduce them to them, I'll say to them, one person in particular, I'm like, I guarantee you, the moment he's 5 minutes into a conversation and he's looking at his phone, you've lost him.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know what he's like. I know what he's like as a person. If he's tuned into something, he's okay. But the moment he starts looking at his phone, if I could telepathically tell you now to shut up and just ask a better question, or to say, forget what I'm going to talk about, I would do that. And some people just don't do it. They're so into their own way of doing things, and yet the person's just tuned out.
And do you know what that problem has become, in fact, just extortionately bigger now, James, because the remote selling world that we find ourselves in is just materially more difficult to keep prospects engaged. One of the biggest reasons, like, we're talking to someone on a Zoom meeting, is all of the distractions that you as a salesperson don't see what's going on. Because you're not sat in a meeting room where it's face to face with someone, where it's difficult for that prospect to be checking their emails and be checking their Slack notifications, and to be, seeing that, looking at their other monitor on the side of their desk, which exists but you don't see. There's or the phone that's, they're literally looking at their phone underneath their laptop, but you can't see that. Those distractions are like tenfold of what they were before. And so for the seller, selling remotely has become difficult to capture that attention. And that is why, as a salesperson, if you're not asking those great questions, if you're not being completely buyer-centric with your approach, prospects will just find better things to be doing in that sales meeting with yourself. And that might be a hard thing for people to hear, is like, your prospect is probably doing lots of other things while they're in the meeting with you right now, and that you don't realize.
It's so true, and also the reality is, it's the biggest thing. One of the biggest thing I see is people say, "Oh, I've had a great meeting and really went really well." Okay, great. So what's going to happen next? Oh, well, we're going to speak next week. Okay, so tell me more then. Oh yeah, well, it was great. We talked. You talked or they talked? We talked. It was great, and then we were going to have this conversation. It's like, okay, great. So what date's the call booked for next week? Oh no, we're just going to speak. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just see what happens when you phone that person next week, and see what happens. And I did a video on it a couple of months back, and I said, if that person's looking at you going, "Oh, no thanks," yeah, it's because that emotional intelligence in that conversation didn't go the way you wanted to, and invariably happens because you talk too much and didn't ask enough questions. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons just why tools like Refract are so powerful, because it allows you to self-check after the conversation and say, actually, was this prospect engaged? Well, actually, no, because reality is I was actually talking for 80% of the time on that conversation, when I thought I was talking for far less than that. And there was huge portions of that conversation where I was asking prospects questions but not really getting engaged answers back. And unless you have the ability to self-reflect and replay, and you're just constantly living in this bubble of what you believe is to be the case. And I always challenge anybody, is like, listen, no matter what level of experience in sales you're at, immediately listen back to a conversation that you've just had, listen back to the recording, and I bet it sounds different to what you thought it did. And you'll hear things that happen that you didn't hear first time round, and you will have different opinions on how the prospect reacted. And it always, I do it all the time. I listen back to my own calls, and I always just think like, oh God, yeah, definitely did not pick that up first time round, or that question that I asked didn't really get the response that I was looking for, or the prospect didn't really answer my question. And so you've got to become more self-aware as a salesperson if you want to get better.
You have. It's such a good point, and it's one of those things where I'm just consciously there saying it, because I know when I listen to my own calls back, I found out took me a little while, but I was saying the word a lot. So I know it's frustrating, but I was literally, and I probably do it by habit, because it's a habit, right? We built these habits up over time. And suddenly I was saying the word a lot, and every time I listened back, I was cringing. I was like, oh my God, I want the world to open up. But you only look at that by learning and saying, right, okay, I'm now going to make a conscious effort to change it. That's how we all get better, isn't it? So talk about, you've had a lot of, had incredible sales success, and we'll talk about how you founded Refract. Do you remember one of your worst ever sales mistakes? Do you remember something you did specifically wrong that you thought, oh my God, what did I do there? And how could
Yeah, I was thinking about this before the conversation, and the reality is there will just be far too many to pinpoint, and I still make mistakes now, and probably if I had to narrow it down, and I think I alluded to this earlier on, is when I think back to the early part of my career of how I used to run a sales meeting, it just I just, it is cringeworthy stuff, and it's all the stuff that I just realized over time is just not the way to do it. And the reason I'm kind of like, it pains me so much now is I just think, how much more successful could I have been if I didn't do it that way? And this was kind of what a typical meeting used to look like for me, in the early part of my career. It would be 2 or 3 questions, what I would classify as situational questions of the prospect, to kind of understand more about them. And then it'd be like, right, brilliant. Let me load up my presentation and show you all the good things about my company. And like, one of the first slides that I had in my PowerPoint deck was like a logos slide. Like, here are all the brilliant companies that I've worked with. And even here's some background to the business, like what year we were founded and all this rubbish. And I think back now, I think, why would the prospect have cared about any of that? And then it was, here's everything about my product. And it was like literally an end-to-end, every feature, this is what we do, and this is what it looks like. Like, periodically asking the prospect, any questions so far? No questions, carry on. And at the end of the conversation, a bit like, okay, what do you think? And that was kind of more or less how I used to sell, and probably is how a lot of people
it's how they're still selling now, right? That's the problem.
And it's not selling. I was what I describe as a demo monkey. I was just basically just like this robot, just doing the same thing on repeat, and ultimately just, as I said, hoping for those, 1 out of 10 prospects to say, actually, yeah, we've got a project for this, or yeah, that looks really good. When actually so many prospects probably just left the conversation, were never to be heard of again. And that for me, if I had to paint, it was like that kind of summarizes some of the biggest mistakes I used to make in sales, and quickly identified that was holding me back, that it wasn't really selling, and I had to make big changes if I wanted to actually, get better and get to where I wanted to be as a salesperson.
I hear you totally, and it's so my previous company, I have got a CRM company, and I remember we used to get demos, and we do 2 or 3 demos a day, and I remember listening to, doing my first demo, and literally like, okay, here's my system, we do this, and I'd spend 35 minutes going through a demo, literally. And then it sort of dawned on me, and it's funny because my inspiration in sales was my dad. My dad was a sales director, and he came into one of the conversations. He'd been in the office once, and he said, he looked at me. He said, all that stuff you've just been through. He said, how much of that did they ask for? And I said, what do you mean how much they asked for? He said, well, you went through all of those, those menus there. How much did they ask for all of that? I was, well, what do you mean? No, that's just a demo. He said to me, well, why don't you ask them what they want to see in the demo? And it's sort of like, when like a penny drops, you think,
yeah,
that's actually a really good point, actually. Wouldn't it be good? She said, yeah, why don't you just say to them, what would be the useful thing for us to cover in the demo to make sure it's, effective for you? And I was like, sometimes it's your dad there, so I was a bit like, I didn't want to accept that it was his advice, but I was like, brilliant. And I started, this was quite early in my CRM company, and I changed it around. And again, I see it a lot. I have a lot of people ask me about software demos. It's like, don't worry about what you do. Focus on what they want to achieve. What's going to be the factors that they want to get from this conversation? What are the bits that they want to see, and why do they want to see those bits? What's the underlying problem behind those parts? But I'm afraid, like you say, so many people don't do it well, and it's why people probably find that sales, because we live in an industry, we're both proud of being salespeople, but a lot of people feel we're a bit like, we're sort of like you've got a stigma attached to you somewhere along when you say you're in sales, isn't it? And it's wrong, because it's so important in any business. If you haven't got sales, you don't have a business.
I think you're right. I think, you know, sales still has this negative connotation attached to it, particularly in the UK. You know, still now, if I meet new people and I tell them I'm in sales, I can kind of like see they're making judgments in their head behind their eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's because I think our experience of salespeople is people who, it's not a positive one. It's not one of somebody who can help me see problems I didn't realize I had, is to help people make good strategic decisions.
Add value. Add value.
Yeah, exactly. And to listen and understand to what's important, and to only sell those things which are really important. And you know, I think that's the kind of mission that we're on at Refract, is to change that. You know, as I'm sure in one of your big missions too, James. And but it's for sales, for such a huge profession by way of the number of people that are in it, still doesn't necessarily get treated as a profession of like improvement, practice, you know, striving to be better. Like any profession is, you professional wants to get better at what they do. That's why they're professional. And unfortunately, sales, I think, has still got a long way to go in that regard.
It has, but it's also, I think it is getting better. Or some companies are seeing it in the right way, but it's also the approach they take. So I always think there's three ways. There's a video I did about, there's three ways to sell. There's what I call an F 'em and duck 'em. So sell anything anyone, and then literally duck all the crap that comes back the other way. There's deliver and disappoint, and there's transform and tribe. And I always say, if you can transform and tribe and literally engage with a prospect and change their life for the better through a problem or want, they become your disciples, they become your sales force. But yet most businesses have just got this mentality, and they bring salespeople in. And we were talking beforehand about a client that have done it the right way. They've got mentoring, they've been supported, they've been assisted, and they're already starting to see the results are positive from the clients they're engaging with. But so many companies bring salespeople in that they're going to put a big, a decent amount of investment in, and suddenly sort of say leave them to it and expect them to be successful. And it's like, well,
yeah.
Well, how are they going to suddenly be successful just because you've left them to it? And then you look back in 3 months and say, oh, well, you haven't hit that number. Well, why not?
Yeah, and it's the the problems with it is that the vast majority of people never choose to make a conscious decision to be in sales. They fall into it, and sales is one of those professions where you can fall into it because there's no qualifications or oftentimes experience that you've needed, that the bar is so low for an entry into a lot of sales roles. So that the emphasis on why training and coaching and development, that's why it has to be so high in sales, because that barrier to entry is so low, because people are coming in with no qualifications or experience. And I think that's the disappointing thing, is that it's because it's seen as like a low grade profession with a lot of companies. It's like, well, they'll figure it out, or some will work out, some won't. So what? Yeah. And I think that the pleasing thing is with the companies that we sell to, no doubt with the companies that you work with, is that they are companies who don't have that philosophy. That they have a philosophy of, like, they understand that unless you spend time and invest in developing your sales force, you're just going to constantly be on a hamster wheel, essentially, and just churning out people who don't work out, not necessarily for their own fault either.
It's such a good point. And also I get people say to me, oh, well, I'm just gonna get someone in, and I say, okay, cool, talk to me about the salary and the package and how you're going to train them. Oh, I'm not, the commission only. Oh, right. Okay, so you're not going to, no, just want them to sell for me. I'm just going to get them to sell. I'll give them 10, 15%, whatever. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so, tell me how that's going to work out. Well, people need a job, people need work, people need money now, right? Okay, so you're going to want someone that's really desperate to earn, and that's going to make your company look good, right? Ooh.
Yeah. It's pretty rough stuff. If how can you expect somebody to be committed to your business, to want to work hard for you, if you're not going to invest in them as a person?
Yeah, no,
Doesn't make sense.
it doesn't. It doesn't. So look, we want to talk about, because obviously I got to know about you through, or I know about Refract anyway, but I watched the interview with Jason. Prospecting is one of the challenges that most salespeople have, isn't it, in terms of being able to engage
Yeah.
and pick up the phone. And I would say to people, there's no such thing as cold calling, but targeted calling is still very much alive. So targeted, being able to identify a group of people you're good with and be able to engage with them. But it still brings the fear of God into a lot of salespeople, doesn't it? And then there was a great, I'll let you phrase it. There's a phrase that you've obviously identified from your system, Refract, that is a great way to introduce someone into a call. Talk to me a little bit about how you feel, people feel about prospecting and some of the ways in which they can do it more effectively.
Yeah, I think how people feel about prospecting again is largely negative. One, because a lot of salespeople don't want to do it; they feel it might be below them. Secondly, people just have an intrinsic, and I'll talk specifically about using the phone here, have a fear of it as well. They have, as humans, we're brought up and developed to do everything that cold calling isn't. Don't talk to strangers, don't interrupt people. All these things that as a human you're brought up to, and then as you suddenly get asked to cold call, it goes against all those principles that your parents used to teach you growing up. And I think that's where a lot of the anxieties come from, is it's so out of many people's comfort zone, to feel like they're interrupting somebody, to feel like they're going to get hung up on, and ultimately it's because they're too attached to the outcome. They're thinking about those things, but not caring less about it. I think in sales and prospecting, if you start caring less, although that might sound weird, you care less, you just become more relaxed about it. I always say, like, the purpose of making a cold call is not to book a meeting, because you're attaching your outcome. That is the outcome. That has to be the outcome. If it doesn't, it's a failure of a call. Rather than the purpose of this call is just to figure out, have I created enough emotion in somebody who wants to carry on talking to me, who wants to talk to me again? I don't know yet if they're going to buy from me, but are they interested in talking to me? And if they're not, that doesn't matter. I'll find someone who is. So I think first of all, when you detach yourself from the outcome, you get more relaxed about doing it. That's certainly what happened with myself. Secondly, it's kind of like, how do you deal with nerves and anxieties about anything? Well, you get more confident in it. How do you get more confident in it? You get more capable in doing something. You intrinsically become more confident about doing stuff that you're more capable of doing. It's like anything in life. How do you get more capable? Well, you practice, which might sound bizarre for some people listening to this, but also you have to rely, and for some people this is harder to come by than others. You have to rely on being taught and coached by someone. You have to be taught a framework, a process, a way of doing it. And for a lot of salespeople, they don't have that person. But there's a lot of content out there freely available on LinkedIn and other places that wasn't available when I was going back 30 years.
Me.
for you too, that if you genuinely care about getting better, you can find the content out there. But the other part of it as well, I think James the other thing I hinted is, like, some people just see it as being kind of below them. They don't want to do it. And I can sort of get it. I understand why it's seen as the less attractive part of sales, but the most successful salespeople that I've worked with have been the ones that have always cared for their own pipeline generation and seen it as not like, I need to do it, and they do it.
It's such a good point, and I'm not sure which there was someone I heard a story from in America that said it, but I think it's so true. And that's that if you can't ask for a meeting, how can you ask for money?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
if you're so good at being able to ask for, but yet you're not able to ask for a meeting, so it doesn't make sense that you can get something from it. And yet you're right, it's seen as being, oh, I'll just get someone to appoint me. You know, I was talking to Jeb Blount about this, and you know, about what he thinks to appointment setters. And it's like, you know, well, if someone, oh, well, they don't want to do it because, like you say, because it's not their job. It's like, well, and he's like, rubbish. If I want a full cycle salesperson who's actually knows that it's part of their day, knows that they've got to do it, and actually they're in control of their own activity, rather than someone that gets me 50 leads and then, well, actually 45 of these don't really want to be there because they just agreed to an appointment because someone's going to get a commission for it. So
yeah, it's self-entitled salespeople. I'll call it out for what it is. It's salespeople who just will sit there, will complain that, you know, their SDRs or their lead generators haven't put enough in their calendar, and they'll spend more time complaining about it than actually trying to do something about it. And you know, like when I recruit and hire salespeople here at Refract, business development managers, yes, we have SDRs that help with that process. But I always say whatever they put on is the kind of the cherry on the top stuff. Like, you are responsible for building your own pipeline, and that never stops. And if they have got a problem with it, I say you're not a good fit for the role here then, because you won't be successful. Because I know what you need to do to be successful, and that's by investing time every single day, even when you feel like you haven't got a lot of time, but making the time for trying to get some new stuff back in the top of the funnel. It's very basic sales principle, but
OG Mandino stuff. I think you probably read OG Mandino stuff. It's like, you know, one more call, one more call, one more call. It's just like another. It's don't leave the office until you get those a few things done. But but you mentioned, so you know, I'm conscious of time, and you're a busy man. You've got lots of. But you mentioned this. There was an introduction that I heard that was brilliant, and I thought I've got to get you to repeat this introduction. That was so. Let's just say I've got a targeted list of people that I'm going to reach out to, and I know that I'm a good fit for them, and I can solve a problem or want for them. But getting through that first hurdle is difficult. So there was a brilliant one that you used with Jason. Yeah. I'd love you to share here.
I think it's the part of the call that most people have anxiety about is, will the prospect give me a chance to speak and to talk more? I think that's the kind of the big nerve that the anxieties that people have is just, if I've got a prospect that's willing to give me time and isn't wanting to get me off the phone, then that's kind of half the battle, which I sort of agree with that. And the problem is that people don't get their call openings right. They use the openings that they make on calls, just make them sound like a salesperson. And as soon as you sound like a salesperson, your prospects are intrinsically trained to just get you off the phone, to use any objection that comes to mind in that specific moment, and you're on the back foot. So you know, we spend a lot of time like analyzing what works here at Refract, and also, you know, trying out different openings and split testing different things. Because I think this comes back to what sales is now. It's became like a science. It's like, find something that works and then double down on it. And so we use this kind of pattern interrupt, which is just about kind of making the prospect just stop and pause and think, that sounds a bit unusual, and doesn't kind of takes them out of that normal course of action that they're going to take of, this sounds like a sales call, I'm going to a meeting, or whatever else they say. And so for us at Refract, it's always worked a treat. Is sounds something like, hi James, I appreciate I've interrupted your Monday morning, but can I take 35 seconds and explain why I have chosen to call you today? And there's different elements as to why I believe that works. First of all, it's kind of the outright acknowledgement that I am an interruption, and kind of I'm saying I understand. I'm not oblivious to that, which I think helps prospects kind of get on your side. Secondly, 35 seconds is just a very
unique
and intentional. And we have tried others, but 35 seconds is the one that seems to work well for us. And you know, it just sounds very different to if you got a few minutes, if you got a minute, or if you got 5 minutes. It sounds very intentional and doesn't sound like you're asking for the world. Doesn't sound like it's, you know, you're asking for 10 seconds. It just sounds like just enough. And when I say to explain why I have chosen to call you this morning, it makes it sound like this call is very intentional. Why I've chosen to call you this morning, not, you know, why I've chosen to call you, why I've chosen to call you this morning. it sounds like this is a very selected, careful call that is just for you, James. This is a special call. And even if I've got you on a big long list of 50 other people, which I probably have, ultimately the psychology of the prospect thinks, well, actually, this sounds like it's got some genuine value in for myself. And 9 times out of 10, yeah, go ahead, Richard. Believe it or not.
And then what do you do? And then, this is the interesting bit, isn't it? Because then you got 35 seconds, and is that when so here's the question. So if I was in my, and I think it's brilliant, and I hear this, and I'm so pleased you've shared it because I think it's such a great way to engage with prospects. The question people will ask me, they'll say, and I'm going to say to them, go and have a look at it, go and talk to Richard, or go and get Refract as a product. But the point is, if they say, what you've then got that chance. I guess the question is, what do you do? And now I would say, and I could be wrong. This is where I'm going to be tested out here. I would potentially just talk a little bit about a challenge or an issue that's going on in their world and ask them how they deal with that challenge. But
yeah,
am I right or wrong?
More or less, that's what we do. Is
I'm on the right path. That's a good deal. At least I'm doing the right things.
But I think we obviously sing off the same hymn sheet. Is that 35 seconds is not for me to talk about my amazing conversation intelligence platform that analyzes conversations and transcribes and picks out keywords and all this other rubbish that the prospect doesn't care about. Is to say, we solve these problems for people like you. Does any of that sound familiar or sound like something you'd want to talk about? And you make it all about them. You make it relevant. You make it understandable. You don't make it about your product, which they don't care about. And after that 35 seconds, they might want to talk more. They might not, and that's perfectly fine. And I think that's generally how it sort of plays out. But if you watch the webinar that I did with Jason Bay, I go through that framework for anybody who's interested in finding out more about that. But I think, but it's worth saying that me just saying that call opening sounds quite straightforward. There are some nuances to that as far as like the tonality and the emphasis on certain words. Like, it has taken literally hundreds, thousands of calls to kind of nail that over time. And again, it just shows that this stuff doesn't just come naturally. You have to work on it. You have to practice it. You have to listen back and hear, that emphasis didn't, or that tonality didn't quite hit the mark. And it's very specific. And it's again, the message I'm conveying here to the listeners of this is try and improve and practice and get better.
Put a plan and have a plan. I always talk to the guys that in my academy and the clients, have a plan. Don't just wing it. Just know what you're going to do and what the plan looks like, and actually know how you're going to approach this stuff. And otherwise, it becomes a real if you're going to literally just sort of, I'll put it out there and wing it. You're going to get wing it reactions. You're going to get wing it results.
100%.
And if you've got a plan, you know what the sales plan is and what you're going to try. And actually try some different stuff. Like you say, try different things. Marketing sales is all about trying new things that work and don't work. But yeah, it's brilliant. So look, I'm conscious of time, and you've given up a lot of your time this morning. So I don't want to take the mick, as it were, and keep you longer than you need, because there's lots of good stuff people can get from Refract. But before I go, a couple of things. What made you start Refracting, and how's that journey for you as a founder and business owner? I mean, because it must be one of those weird things as well, because you're in the sales industry. So I get this a bit. People expect you to convert every conversation, and I'm like, it doesn't happen. We're not miracle workers. We just a little bit. We try and be good at what we do, right? But how's it been? Founding Refract in the last few years of the journey. I know you guys are growing well, so it's a great fun, I imagine.
Yeah, I just think on your point there, people still seem to think there are silver bullets in sales, and there isn't. If you knew how to make everybody buy, there'd be far more rich people in the world. What you sell, there's only going to be there's going to be less people who need your stuff than need it, no matter what you sell in the world. And that's just a reality. And part of sales is just finding out those people, find those people who are going to get value from what you sell. Why we create the company? Well, I think I maybe gave a little bit of a window into this in the earlier part of the interview, James, of my experience of kind of seeing people go into a meeting room and not really knowing what they were doing, sometimes did, and then coming out. And that was kind of like one of the reasons that we created Refract, was there's so much value hidden in sales conversations, sales happens when two people have a conversation, and the effectiveness of that conversation really is the thing that drives the outcomes, whether deals are won or not won, or whether they're progressed or not progressed, or whether appointments get set or don't get set. But so many companies just have such a lack of visibility into what's actually going on in those conversations in their team, and that problem has become unsurmountably bigger with the world that we're living in today, with so many people now working from home, and literally that visibility is so hard to overcome. And the other part of why we started Refract was I was one of these people, like many others, that, as I said, fell into the profession, and was kind of like, yeah, I got my product training, and this is who we sell to, and these are our competitors, and all this kind of stuff, like the theory, I guess, of what I needed to know. But what I didn't ever really have the benefit of is somebody to actually listen back to what I was doing and say, okay, this is
what you could have done differently.
This is what exactly. Okay, that didn't really work. What would happen if you tried this next time? Have you heard what your colleague over there has done in their last conversation? Could you try and replicate some of that in your next call? Ultimately, proper real life coaching of how I was executing in my conversations. And when we started Refract 5-6 years ago, the industry actually stated that some of the industry metrics that came out, which I think will have improved since then, but not materially, is that 3/4 of leading organizations at the time said that coaching is the most priority function of a frontline sales manager, but the average sales manager invests, I think it was less than 5% of their week, less than 5% of their week actually doing it, and probably when they were doing it, not doing it very well. So there's this massive dichotomy over what companies are saying. This is what we expect our managers to be doing. This is the most important function, but the most important function of their role getting literally next to no time attached to it. And for myself, in my early part of my career, it was a little bit of the case. Like my coaching would, when I started doing meetings, was where if the odd occasion that my boss would go to the meeting with me, would be like what I would call like the 5-minute debrief in the back of the taxi on the way back to the train station. And so much of that feedback never really made sense because it was all kind of memory and stuff that I wasn't aware of. And so we kind of wanted to provide a solution to this problem of how can we help companies start to make coaching more easier, more dynamic for sales managers. How can we make it easier for companies to get quicker, better insights into the conversations their salespeople are having, and ultimately taking that data and using that to help get better outcomes.
It's such a good point, and I'm so glad you guys are there doing it, because I know 2 salespeople are quite close to me that whose boss they haven't seen their boss in 4 months.
Yeah,
they haven't spoke to their boss in 4 months, but yet their boss is happy to sign off on a new 45 grand car. Okay, so I'm literally I'm sitting there stunned sometimes, where the companies are prepared to spend off on this big investment to go and see people, but yet won't then invest maybe part of the time in a trainer or someone who just to coach that person. And part of that is also because a lot of those salespeople think they know it all anyway. So I would say to people, if you think you know it all, you're done, you're cooked, because we're all in that position where I'm learning every day about stuff. I'm learning from you today. I learn from other people on a regular basis. I love learning because it's what drives me.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you think A, that you don't need to learn, and B, you're just so blasé about the stuff that makes people learn, then I think you've got a bigger problem as a company, personally. But I'm so glad you guys exist, because it's a great way for people to start to use it. So if anyone's watching this and they're thinking, how could they use Refract? Is it easy enough for them to get started on? Is it in a position where they can, it links, just to give people, I'm not giving you a bit of a pitch now, but it links to their calls. It allows them to listen to the calls from their typical phone system, and then, enables them to record it back, right?
Yeah, and we work with sales teams of all sizes. Any company that literally has a desire to want to improve outcomes in their conversations would be a good fit. And I think our technology just plugs into phone systems, video conferencing tools like Zoom that we're talking on right now. Generally pretty quick and easy to get started, and to also start to get valuable insights. I think one of the questions I get asked is, surely this only works for those doing, those companies doing high volume outbound calls, and the reality is it doesn't. It's like, you take even complex sales cycles where actually the importance of analyzing what's going on at different phases of that sales cycle is probably more crucial than if it was just a one call close job. It really is about, helping any company who wants to figure out how to get better outcomes, how to make their people more effective in sales. Again, we were seeing recently a lot of customers coming on board with us because I think of this new sort of norm that we're in right now with so many more virtual meetings taking place, salespeople who are at home feeling isolated, not really getting the collaboration with their team that they would normally, so we're helping with that too.
Fantastic. Well, it's going to be great. And by the way, you are working on the Refract little sort of robot that's going to come into a meeting room alongside a salesperson. Because once they've done the calls and they go face to face, you are working on that, Jacob. Can you imagine? But one of the things I'd love to see is I'd love to be able, because literally, you can coach people on the telephone calls and then they bugger it up when it goes to the meeting. You're like, no, you need a Refract robot in there to listen to that conversation. I'm joking. But seriously, I do think that's the area where this stuff will go next, is because actually that's where a lot of salespeople get it wrong. You guys can do so much, you can get them to a certain point, but if they then do go and bugger up the next phase of the meeting, then there's not much that happens. But look, it's been brilliant to speak to you, and I know that you're a busy man and got lots on. So where can people go? They can head to, just share the URLs.
Yeah, so if you want to check out Refract, our address is www.refract.ai, and if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on there, post a lot of content, mainly around coaching and kind of insights from conversations and best practices. So happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. If you search for Richard Smith at Refract, if you search for Richard Smith by itself, there'll be a lot of people, because it's not the most uncommon name in the world. But yeah, Richard Smith Refract is a good place to connect with me personally.
Brilliant. Look, well, thank you ever so much for sharing your advice, Richard. And look, I think the advice you share around whether you're a big business or small business or new to sales or experienced in sales is the same. That's if you listen to what you do and you're prepared to learn, you're open to change and adjusting your approach and focusing on your prospects. And I know from the numbers that you guys have shared, those that get the great results are ones that listen, that ask great questions, that know to pause, know to shut their mouth at the right time, and all those other things that we all talk about, which is really important. So look, it's been absolutely fantastic to have your insights and knowledge today. So thank you. And final, before I go, who was any final tips for anyone that want to just be really successful when it comes to selling? Any top tips, one or two tips you'd give them before we finish?
Yeah. Find people who've done really well in sales and observe what they do. So that's the first one. Second one is stop talking about your product as much and start trying to understand the prospects world and their problems, and you will become more successful.
Perfect answers. My dad says to me, "You've got two ears and one mouth. Use them in proportion," right? So
right.
Exactly. So look, really appreciate your time today, Richard. I know you're a busy man, so thank you. I'm going to share the video with everyone on the YouTube channel in a week or so's time. And look, really, if you want to reach out to Richard, I encourage you to reach out and talk to him. He's a great guy and has got a great product there which can help you and your business grow to the next level. So Richard, thank you, much appreciated. Yep. And I'll let you carry on with your day, and hopefully lots of sales conversations to go into the Refract database. So.
Cheers, James, appreciate it. Bye.
So there you have it. That was Richard Smith from Refract. How was that? What a great conversation to finish off the Sales Conversations with Sales Expert series with this video, and hopefully you enjoyed Richard's insights into sales. I really encourage you to start recording. If you're listening to this and thinking, I can't afford a system like Refract, just start by using some simple online phone systems. Record your calls, start to see what you're saying, start to listen back to some of those calls and whether you've talked more than you should have done and whether you've asked the right questions. I guarantee you, though, as Richard has said, those salespeople that do, the business people that do that, get better results. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to be a chance to be interviewed for Sales Conversations with Sales Experts, I'd love to get you on the show. Just put an email to alex@jameswhite.business or monya@jameswhite.business, and we'll get you a time set up to do that. Hopefully, if you're in the UK, we might even be able to do it face-to-face quite soon. But until that time, where we're all safe, then we'll probably do it remotely, as it gives you everyone the chance to share some of the insights from these incredible people all over the world as well. So, look, thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you do like it, please subscribe and share the videos with other colleagues and friends. Help them get the sales results that they want. My name is James White, as I say, sales mentor and trainer, a man that's passionate about helping you get brilliant sales results, helping you sell during a recession. So let's work on building our skills so we can achieve our goals and get the results we want. Stay safe, everyone, and happy selling. Speak soon. Bye.